Hello, everyone. I am Rajesh Kalidindi, and I am thrilled to welcome you, all of you, to our webinar today on March 11th. Whether you are joining us live or later tuning into this recording, it's great to have you here. As a secretary and the treasurer of UXPA International, I am humbled to be part of this wonderful community of volunteers dedicating to supporting you in your journey to creating amazing usable experiences. For the last 35 years, UXPA has been all about helping people like you, whether you are just starting out in UX or looking into sharpening your skills. So today, we are diving into the very hot topic in terms of AI, how we can trust. So, the designing trustworthy agenting experiences, and we are so lucky to have Sam with us to share some insights how effectively we can integrate by learning from her experiences. So, today she's going to spend approximately around 35 to 40 minutes or 45 minutes, and then we will dive into questions. So while Sam is going through the content, we encourage all of you to post your questions in the Q&A section. And then when the time is up, Michelle, our office manager, she will facilitate the Q&A session. So without any further delay, I would like to welcome Sam. Please take it from here.
Hi. Did we sort out the sound issues? I noticed there was someone having sound issues. That's all good.
Yeah, I responded. I don't hear any sound, but if anybody else does, please feel free to put that in the Q&A as well or in the chat.
Excellent. Didn't want to start if there was any technical hitches.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So, hi everyone. I'm Sam. Thanks for joining me for this webinar. It's really great to have you here. So, I'm an experienced strategy consultant, and what that means is I spend most of my time helping clients and customers and departments design really intelligent digital products and tools. And at the moment, that seems to be increasingly taking the form of trying to make those products and tools as clever as possible and as AI driven as possible. So what that means for me is I find a lot of my time is spent trying to make sure those products don't actually quietly try and take charge and take over. So today I'm going to be talking about what is arguably the most intelligent digital experience or digital product that we as designers are working with at the moment, and that is agentic AI and agentic tech in general. And really, what about the importance of keeping those systems that we're increasingly starting to rely on trustworthy and how important that is. I use my favorite GPT constantly. In fact, I use both. I use Claude and I use Copilot and I use ChatGPT. I use all of them. I use them for work stuff, life stuff. So I ask, is my dog hungry or is she just greedy? Or how do I decline this meeting invite politely without, actually making it sound like I've got better things to do, for example. And the tools are genuinely useful, but there is an argument to say that they might be as useful as we need them to be. And, at the moment, I don't, even though I use it a lot, I don't let AI fully run my life. I don't let any of the GPTs make the important decisions for me. I'm sure you don't either. I still book my own meetings and choose my own priorities. And yes, I do get a lot of help from my artificial friends, but right now they are supportive. They aren't, making decisions on my behalf yet. But something is shifting. And right now, the systems and products that we interact with every day, they're already influencing what shows up for us. They influence what feels like the next thing, what feels urgent, what feels important to us. And they do this through patterns that we recognize, through recommendations, defaults, automation that's built in, the little nudges they give us. And those machines, those tools that we're using, they're already shaping the decisions we make, even before we've probably consciously made them. And this is going to be a gradual shift I'm talking about here. It's not going to be a Skynet moment where, you know, the Terminator robot kicks in the door and says, we're taking control. Instead, agency is being transferred slowly but surely. And this is all in the pursuit of that, you know, more convenience, disguised perhaps in the pursuit of convenience for the products and the tools that we are designing. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So most of the time, yes, as I said, the AI tools we use, they're going to feel supportive, helpful, useful. But that really is until something goes wrong or until we realize for the first time that the tools we're using are so clever that the AI agent has actually made the decision for us, and without us having really any meaningful input. And that really is the moment I want to focus on today, because as AI moves from assisting us to more acting for us on our behalf, that is going to fundamentally change our human experience. We're no longer, as designers, just designing interfaces or user journeys or flows. The tools we are designing now, more and more, we're going to be designing in that agency. We're designing power. We're going from what was once making recommendations to actually making decisions. We are going from let's make things more automated to let's delegate. From convenience to actually giving over power to these tools. We need to be sure that as we design them, we understand that there are decisions to be made and who's making it, who's making those, who's deciding what happens. And importantly, who understands what's happening when we're using these agentic tools. And the most important thing, can we and who can step in when something ultimately goes wrong? I think right now, most of the conversations about AI that I'm sure most of you are having and that I'm having that are on the telly, you know, in the media in general, they swing between kind of two extremes around AI. So on the one side, we have the real hype. So this is the AI was going to save us time. I mean, it removes friction and it will optimize everything. And then we have, on the other hand, there's the kind of doom stuff. So it's going to take control, it's going to destroy our jobs, it's undermining trust. Now, all of these things are actually true, but I think what's probably missing here in this narrative is that, and between those two extremes, is some kind of reality which is gives clear direction to the people who are actually being asked to design these AI-driven tools, and build the real products and experiences that are powered by this ever increasing intelligence. And I think today, rather than this isn't about talk, is AI good, is AI bad? This talk today, I really want to focus on something a bit more practical and more immediate, and that is, what does it actually mean to be designing these experiences and making sure they're trustworthy as AI begins to take on more and more agency. So before I go any further, I thought it might be worth pausing to actually reflect on what I've said so far. And that is, you know, when was the last time a system actually made a decision for you? So you're probably thinking, well, you know, I don't actually let machines make decisions for me. We're not there yet. And that is probably true for now. But I'm sure you can all think of the last time a system or a tool or an app actually influenced you. So influenced what you saw first and what felt most urgent to you, what seemed like the obvious next step to take. You probably, did you even notice it? Maybe you didn't. And if you did notice it, the chances are you didn't really understand how it was happening or what was happening exactly. within the algorithms behind it. And you definitely, very likely, couldn't have easily changed that influence or, that adjusted the levers that were working on influencing you. So these influence patterns, we all know they didn't appear by accident. They are woven into the fabric of the systems we use every day. And these systems, these patterns, this is the foundation that agentic AI is being built directly on top of. It's where the agentic AI experience starts. Long before we build in autonomy and full autonomy appears, it's not going to be this like dramatic AI takeover, but it will be, as I said, but it will be the quiet, subtle, gradual extension of those really manipulative patterns that we already just take for granted. We accept them as normal. So the recommendation engines, the endless scrolling, the outrage, clickbait, the stuff that we encounter every day. This was a playbook created by big tech. And it's those same companies, those same big tech bro companies, they're the ones that own the LLMs that we're using, that underpin all the tools, the agentic AI driven tools that we're building and enhancing. And we know that there's been very little appetite to fix or rewrite the patterns as they stand. So the only people really that are gonna put the brakes on the people that own these large language models, they're not the big tech bros. They're not going to be putting the brakes on. Yes, we have regulation from governments, but that really it hasn't caught up yet. And it's going to be constantly catching up. This is changing every day. So that responsibility of who puts the brakes on this, who manages this, that lands with the people doing the design. So the people on this call today, the people watching this webinar with the wireframes and the journey maps and, working on product roadmaps, feature roadmaps, that is us. So what this session is about today is looking at how we can, as designers and technologists, create that agentic AI system user experience, design systems that can initiate actions, can make decisions on our behalf, and operate with a greater or lesser degree of autonomy, and how we can design those in a way that is safe. So this isn't a talk about productivity and using AI to speed up how we do our UX, to automate our research, generate designs and UI for us. That's a different conversation, and I'm sure a lot of you are having that. But what we're talking about today is really about the focus is going to be on what happens when AI is no longer just a tool that we use in a workflow, but actually becomes an actor within an experience. So not the product that people are using, but literally the power behind that interface. So let's start with what? The concepts and the frameworks that really underpin agentic behavior. So to ground this discussion a bit more, I thought it might help to distinguish between the different kinds of AI behavior. So at one end of the spectrum, we have reactive systems. So they respond only when we explicitly trigger them. So like setting an alarm. And then we have the assistive systems. So more like the ones, I guess, that we're using day to day, the chat agents, so the GPTs. So they suggest things, they recommend things, and they really support our decisions as human beings, rather than make those decisions for us. And then the proactive systems. So these are systems that anticipate our needs more. So they act within a kind of limited initiative that we give them. So we might say, for example, one of these smart home agents where we say, tell it what time we get home, and within that limited parameter, it decides whether to turn the heating on or not. So that's proactive. And then finally, where we're heading breakneck speed agentic systems. So these are systems that we give an instruction to, a goal, and they plan, decide, and completely act on our behalf to achieve that goal. And no matter what it takes, effectively. So what really matters, I guess, here isn't these labels, but what changes for us as designers as the tools we're creating move along that spectrum from reactive all the way to agentic. So for each of those steps, we really need to ask, who is initiating the action? Is it the user and the series of actions, or is it the machine? Who's actually making the decisions as we go through the steps? And really importantly, who's accountable if something goes wrong? If the agentic AI makes the decision and something goes wrong, then who is responsible? That's such an important question, because as AI becomes more and more agentic, that responsibility doesn't just disappear, it basically shifts. And that shift is probably harder to track than you think. And I think a really good example of this is driverless cars. It's a bit of an extreme example. I don't think any of us probably on this call is designing a driverless car or has, but it's a really good example of extremes. And that is, if a human driver causes an accident, responsibility is clear. But if a driverless car causes an accident, that's a whole different thing. Nobody really knows who to blame because nobody has their hands on that wheel. But somebody's fingerprints were definitely in that code. So this gets to the heart of agentic systems, really. That responsibility for outcomes doesn't vanish. It just gets distributed. And it can not just to one agent, but to many layers of agents, because that's how agentic, primarily works. That then becomes almost impossible to trace when it's passing through so many different processes and agentic decision points. So the question here is really, when these tools are being designed and these products, whether users are meaningfully part of that decision making process, users and humans in that loop. And so far, I think it really doesn't seem like they are. In most agentic systems, humans are not meaningfully part of the decision process they're making. And that is fundamentally, that's a design problem, which is why it's so important for us as designers to be aware of it and to have a way of managing it. So what happens when AI becomes agentic? Effectively, there are shifts, and each one of those shifts has powerful user experience consequences and design consequences. So when a tool becomes a collaborator, it effectively starts to gain influence. It's not just doing what we tell it anymore. It's not executing our instructions. It's actually shaping them. And every time we hand over a decision or a goal to a chain, an agent or a chain of decision-making agents, AI agents, then that original intent gets interpreted, gets filtered, it gets diluted, and this is how we end up with poor outcomes and agents making mistakes. When what was previously just supportive, AI that is supportive, is given authority, then that accountability, it disappears because nobody is owning that outcome anymore. And another example of this at the macro level was with, I'm sure most of you are aware of United Health's NH Predict algorithm, where it was autonomously making the decision, denying insurance claims based on a goal that it had been given around a commercial goal. And this had really serious, and is probably still having serious poor health outcomes for people. And there was no meaningful way for people to, when they realised this, to intervene or even push back. And that includes the people that were actually working for United Health, the actual insurance adjusters, claims adjusters themselves were unable to see what was going on or intervene meaningfully in the decision that the predict algorithm was making, the artificial intelligence agent in the process. And that is really good example of what authority without accountability looks like. So it's not efficiency, or it might be efficiency, but what it really is just power that's got nowhere to go when something goes wrong. And that is on a micro level, even the core tension we as designers are going to need to navigate very soon, if not already. Because yes, agentic AIs, it brings autonomy, it brings speed, efficiency, reduces the cognitive load on our users. These are all things we're aiming for as designers and technologists. They're all good things. But the users still need to understand what's happening. They still need to have some meaningful control and be able to step in to these processes when something goes wrong. So it's a constant balancing act between speed and safety, between convenience but keeping control, and between smart agents that are really clever but also need to be accountable. And there isn't a single right answer to this. Obviously, there's not one big fix, but there are better and worse design decisions we can make. We're not actually destined to build the first robot overlord like Hal and Vicky from the movies. They're not inevitable. But to navigate this tension, we do need something a bit more practical. So not just policy documents or governance frameworks that sit gathering dust somewhere on a SharePoint or a government web page or a Microsoft web page. What we need is something a bit more simple that we can use in the room and at the moment. You know, when someone says, can we just make this work, do it automatically? We need something to lean on. So because I've been thinking a lot about this, I created something. I put something together, which I've called which I'm sharing with you today, which I've called ACT for Agentic Experience. Very catchy. And ACT as an acronym, ACT, is actually already doing some quite serious heavy lifting out there. So you may have heard of the UNICEF version, which is a really important framework around women's health and equality. And then we have the EU AI Act, which references ACT obviously as well, and lots more. So to be really clear, this is just a kind of lightweight version of a practitioner lens to be used, you know, at the moment of design, and it's not a serious government governance or government document. So ACT stands for autonomy, clarity, and take back. So it's not a maturity model, it's not a checklist, it's just a lens that can help guide you, and you can maybe pick it up in a design review or when you're designing a journey or a feature, or someone says, can we just automate that, you know, in the team or the client. So A is for autonomy. So how much power are we actually giving the systems we're building? So this isn't theoretical, this is actually in practice. So who is initiating the action that the tool is taking, or the actions, and how far can that AI, that agent go without the user intervening? Because autonomy isn't inherently a bad thing, of course. The problem is only really when that autonomy starts to increase silently in the background without visibility and without that level of user control. So the principle is really graduating that autonomy. So letting the systems earn our trust rather than just handing over the trust at the beginning and saying, you know, off you go. We trust you to initiate the best outcome here. C is for clarity. So this is where we want users to understand what's happening, what is the tool doing. So not just after something goes wrong thinking, oh, we should really find out how that works, but before. So as a user, you know what the tool is doing to get to the goal that you've set it. And this is really what we mean by calibrated trust. It's where users, they don't need to understand everything that the tool's doing. Of course they don't. They just need to know enough so that they can trust the tool, and they know when to push back. So they know when to trust it and when to push back. If they only notice, or if we only notice when the AI, that there's an AI process there, when it breaks, then that clarity point has already failed. So T is for take back. That's take back's not the best word, but it meant that I could say act. So this is about allowing users to reclaim control, to undo, to override, to exit. So this is quite a basic UX principle in general, I think, for when we're designing, useful, usable experiences. But it's really important when it comes to agentic, because without reversibility, that's when that autonomy that we give the tool suddenly becomes authority. So that's simple rule really, is that no agency without reversibility. And of course, reversibility is always much easier before users get used to using the system and the system becomes really entrenched. So having that reversibility built in upfront is important. So sounds great in theory, but let's have a look now at how it might work in practice. So when do I think we should actually be using the ACT framework? It's not a framework, the ACT lens. So before starting any agentic feature, and it's not just new stuff. I think a lot of the stuff that's coming down the pipeline at the moment is taking stuff that already exists, tools that already exist, and making them more agentic, giving upgrading systems by giving them more autonomy than they have now. So it's not just brand new stuff, it's enhancing existing stuff. So before you start, ask yourself 3 questions. How autonomous are we going to make this? How clear is the level of autonomy that we're giving it? And how reversible is it? And if any of those, the answers to those questions feel a bit vague, then that's probably a really good signal, a really good sign to stop and get those answers, because those vague answers, they don't just signal ethical risk. They're also, likely to result in a tool that gets complaints, has liability issues, and especially if you're creating tools for regulated industries or government industries, then you're risking compliance failures by not having that level of clarity. And that's not just an ethical risk, that's actually a product risk. And I think that distinction really matters, because what it does is it enables you to say, to push back and say, look, we're building in risk. And it gives you more of a commercially focused language, because sometimes I think if you just talk about ethics, you don't often get perhaps as heard by everyone as you should be. Whereas if you can create that more commercial angle of, like, this is a product risk, then you're much more likely to be able to be supported in building in that layer of safety. So most of the harmful patterns that are, just like in UX in general, the harmful patterns that are going to be emerging or can emerge in agentic AI, they don't come from bad intentions. We're not designing them in on purpose. The client isn't briefing us, I would hope, most of the time, to build those harmful patterns in. They come from that pressure to get to MVP faster, reduce friction more, automate everything. And it's in that kind of rush to get to sort of agentic perfection or maximize on the technology that these patterns tend to emerge. So with invisible delegation, this is where decisions are happening kind of off screen, so the user isn't really aware they're happening. And this is an example of, so the power is shifting. We're giving power to the tool, but obviously it's not taking responsibility because it can't, because it's AI. And then there's the illusion of control. So this is the interface suggesting to the user that they are making the choices when actually they're not. The outcome has kind of already been determined. The choice has been taken away from them, but the user is still feels like they're in control and responsible. Silent drift. So this is a pattern where the system is evolving effectively. And what the user agreed to perhaps when 6 months ago when they downloaded it isn't quite what they're using today. And they haven't been really made aware or asked if they want that evolution and those changes, which is means the outcomes are actually drifting from the original intent. Our moral buffering, so this is the result of removing that human from the accountability chain, and it's saying, well, the AI decided. So that's obviously a real moral failure and can lead to some very bad outcomes and decisions. And these aren't hypothetical failure models. They are happening in products right now. And they do tend to show up together. So if you fix one, you probably will find the others underneath it. And then that's just a really good time to stop and reassess how much autonomy you're handing over to the tool and perhaps think about a slight redesign. The good news is that those patterns, like the dark UX patterns that we already know, they aren't inevitable. So for every one of them, there is a design technique or a design move that pushes back on them. So we've got something called visible agency. So this is kind of the opposite of what we said before. It makes the user that what the AI is doing explicit, makes it noticeable, makes the user aware. So it's not buried somewhere in the system in a log. It is visible. It's in the moment, especially when the action is happening. So the user really can see what's going on. And then we have confirm before commit. So this is again putting a human checkpoint in at the really important moments, the moments that matter most. So obviously not for every action that the agent takes, otherwise it defeats the object of using an agent to make decisions on our behalf at all. And we really don't want to add friction. The whole point is to remove friction. But when we have really high impact decisions, like decisions that really matter, then we want users to be able to step in before they actually commit and obviously be easily able to undo those decisions. And that brings us to explain and exit. So not just telling users what's happened after it's happened, but giving users a way to stop things from happening, like an escape hatch before decisions are made that might cause harm or just be something that the user doesn't want to happen. And confidence signaling, this is a really good one. So AI, particularly ChatGPT, is so confident in its answers. Its decisions are absolute. It gets things wrong, but it gets things wrong with absolute certainty. So this is where we introduce language and caveats like I think or based on or I'm not certain but. So it's allowing the user to understand how confident the AI is rather than just it sounding like it knows everything, because they can and do make mistakes very confidently. So none of these is a silver bullet though, but they do work really well together. And importantly, they're not going to limit AI. They're not going to, if you put these things in place, they're not going to limit what your agents can do or how intelligent they are or, how well they deliver against the goals we set them. What they will do is make the power that we give them legible. So it won't reduce the power, it just makes that power legible, makes it negotiable, and really importantly, reversible. So I'm going to look at some examples now. I think someone's preempted in the chat. Thank you. So let's look at some real world scenarios. So agentic tools that are actually being built right now. So a really good example is probably a scheduling agent. So this is something that will book meetings for you or events, optimize your week really. And yeah, it's a great idea. It's a really helpful tool to have. But a bad outcome here could be a meeting appears in your diary or an event that you didn't agree to, you haven't prepared for, and you're not really sure you can push back on it now because the agent has that could happen really easily based on the parameters you set the agent. And I'm sure some of us have experienced this as well. So this is the smart office systems that look after the heating and lighting and energy in general. And the idea behind them is usually optimizing for sustainability, which is really worthwhile. And you can get genuinely great outcomes from them. But there's that time when Friday afternoon, not many people are in, so the aircon, hot summer day, the aircon turns off 2 hours early for home time. So those people in the office are left there at their overheating at their desks. They don't know why it suddenly got really warm, or if they do, they don't know how to override the air conditioning system, and then that just becomes very frustrating and reduces rather than increases productivity. And the same with workflow tools in general, so tools that prioritize your tasks. They can be really helpful collaborators on the one hand, but then what happens when they choose what you're working on next and you don't have that choice? That choice is taken away from you and you don't understand where those priorities have come from, or you're not able to change that. And I think one more example, which is outside of the workplace, is the consumer health apps that we're all using now. So there's already quite a few in the market. They track your symptoms if you've got an illness. They track your medication, your activity. But you can imagine what happens when one of these agentic systems actually decides that maybe a symptom that you're tracking isn't worth surfacing. And then that can become a real safety issue. So this would go from being what would be perhaps a bad user experience to something that can actually be quite dangerous and have negative health outcomes. But of course, none of these systems are malicious. They're not setting out to make our life harder or to put us in danger. All they're doing is exactly what we have asked them to do. They're just doing it really, really efficiently. Without something like ACT, without that lens, for that safety lens, then that efficiency that we're building into them, that is what quickly becomes delegation, and that is that delegation that becomes the loss of control that we really need to avoid with super intelligent AI. Well, it's not super intelligence, that's a whole different conversation, but with very intelligent agentic AI. And hopefully the ACT lens can help you better spot when this is happening when you're designing these tools. So how will all this show up in real design decisions, so in your day job? Now, I do a lot of thinking and talking about ethics and ethical design. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about ethical AI, particularly, is that ethics live in policy documents and governance frameworks. And that isn't true. Ethics, where the ethics really lives, is in the interface. So it's in your default button states, your default actions, whether there's a confirmation step in a user journey. Are they able to hit the escape hatch? Is it easy for them to find a way out of journeys that they want to stop, and paths that you're sending them down, or the tool that you're designing is sending them down? And whether uncertainty within the AI itself, within its generated content or pathways, whether that uncertainty that it will definitely often have is visible or hidden. So these aren't fluffy philosophical questions. It's not a philosophical debate about ethics. These are actually built into the design decisions that we make as designers and technologists every day. And in every system that we design is ultimately going to come down to one question, and that is, are we actually helping people to achieve what they need to achieve their goals, to do what they need? Or are we actually, or are the tools we're designing shaping those actions a little bit beyond their intent, which is what, UX already does in, especially within retail, where we have social proof and things like that and all the little nudges. That's where agentic will be so much better at that. It's going to be so good at that. So we need to make sure that we are enabling people with the agentic services and tools and systems we build, not influencing them. So because we talked earlier about the manipulation playbook. So the recommendations engines and that outrage machine and the endless scrolling and all of that stuff that's deliberately built in, proven to be harmful. It's there's no question that that is harmful, but it's still there. It's still in place. And again, that playbook, I think this is so important to say it again, is the infrastructure that agentic AI is running on. It's the same patterns, but much higher stakes, because now it's not just your attention they're going for, it's or that we can take in the tools we're designing. It's actually affecting the decisions that people are making about their health, about their finances. Big tech built this and they're not going to fix it. So it's kind of up to us because we're the people with the designs, with the wireframes, the journey maps, the feature maps, the product roadmaps. That is us, and it matters more now, I think, than it ever has before. So ethics don't come from a governance review. As I've said, they are built into that moment that the designer chooses which action is the default, whether they're going to add a confirmation step before they take the user into the next point of the journey, and how prominent or how easy it is to undo actions. So is that uncertainty displayed? How easy is it to understand and walk away from actions that you've initiated? And what it really means is it decides what, if you look at this chart here, what we think are really small decisions, perhaps in design, actually have really big outcomes. And sometimes users won't question them, or, if you don't give them a moment to reconsider, they can't calibrate their trust in the tool. And that's where agency just becomes completely performative and not real. So let's ground this back into ACT. So to do that, I thought I'd look at one of the agents or scenarios we talked about before with the same capability and look at what the results of applying a lens like ACT or not. So without the ACT lens, okay, so we've asked our scheduling agent we've set it running, and it's running on our phone or our laptop, and it comes up and it tells us your calendar has been optimized for the week. You've got 3 meetings scheduled and 2 rescheduled. So the risk here is there's no explanation, no opt out, and no real understanding for me as the user of why those meetings have been prioritized. Super efficient, but it's completely out of my hands. So let's look at that again on the right with a lens like ACT. So now it becomes a suggestion, not a decision. So I've suggested a schedule for your week based on your focus and time preferences. So now I know the why. Want to review before I confirm anything. So what this gives me is it acknowledges my preferences and it's a genuine checkpoint before anything is confirmed. So the system is doing exactly the same thing in both versions, but the difference is who's in charge here. And I think that's where a lens like ACT, where we really pay attention to what we're designing, it can really help. I didn't put my timer on, so I hope I'm within time. So I wanted to leave you with this reference guide that I put together, and I'm going to put a link in at the end where you can hopefully download it. So it's basically the ACT framework or ACT lens. It has some of the pattern languages I've spoken about, some of the questions you can ask in a design review. Hopefully a good way to to get a reframe around something if you have to have those what can sometimes be quite difficult ethical conversations or with your team or especially with the client. And when that pressure is really on to go further, faster, more agentic, more automated, and really importantly, this is not about limiting AI and the power of AI. It's about asking the right questions at being, have we properly thought this through? Where should the autonomy sit in this tool? And who is in control? And who stays in control? I guess ultimately it's about, I mean, you've probably heard this, I say this all the time, human in the loop. It's about keeping the human in the loop. That's the best way to safeguard the ethical nature of a tool and to stop things from going horribly wrong. And so what this should hopefully do, this takeaway, which I'll be showing you any minute now, is allow you to, support you to be that awkward person in the room and the person that maybe asks the inconvenient questions rather than, just rushing headlong. So it's kind of just one page. It's the lens, the act lens. So to evaluate any agentic feature or agentic features that you're building in. It gives you the pattern language so you can put a name to those risks and and to help you defend your decisions. There's a checklist of review questions. So these are really great to use, I think, at milestones or assessment gates, governance gates, or maybe before go live or soft launch to go back and, review the questions. And an overall ethical safety, user-centered design reframe for the project. So when you're in maybe political or strategic conversations with the product owner or the client or anyone really who wants to push the use of agentic and how intelligent and how autonomous the tool is, it's just enabling you to take that sort of step back and say, well, hang on, let's make sure we have that ethical UCD based framework. So there, I'm going to share a link at the end, as I said, a QR code. And I know this webinar will stay up as well if you need to come back to it. So agentic AI is absolutely here and we're not stopping it. But what I think we can do, especially as designers, is shape how it behaves and importantly, who stays in control. Because we are in that really good position to keep what we're designing aligned to our own human and ethical principles by designing that into the tools that we're building. So I guess in conclusion, agentic AI it's not just changing the products that we use, it's reshaping who actually controls them. And whether we want it or not, really, we are the designers that are designing in that power. So the question, I guess, isn't if AI will act autonomously. It will. It's how it will act autonomously. And importantly, on whose behalf is it going to be acting? And whether people can meaningfully step in when when it's taking action, can people meaningfully step in, preferably before something goes horribly wrong? So hopefully I've given you a tool that will help you with that. I hope you found this interesting. It's something that really interests me, and I think we as designers really do have the power to shape the future of agentic AI. So thank you for listening, and any questions? I think back over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, or Rajesh, I think.
Yep.
Oh, Rajesh. Sorry, Rajesh.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam, for the insightful session.
Oh, thank you.
Especially, I love the ACT lens that you are bringing up. So before, I think there is some questions about the framework and the lens. So before we dive into that, I would like to encourage each one of you attending today to check out the upcoming UXPA International Conference, which is happening in Las Vegas from June 22nd through 25th. Especially this in-person conference brings many topics like this, and most importantly, the invaluable networking opportunities. It helped me immensely to grow in my career. The networking opportunities, I would like you to take advantage of it. So, if you have not checked the program, please check it out, uxpa2026.org. Especially, I would like to draw your attention on the pre-conference courses, where you will spend 3 hours with an expert, dive into a topic and acquiring new skills. So if you are not a member, please become a member to get huge discount on this conference pricing. So if you want to present like Sam, or if you have any other expert recommendations that you want to bring them to the UXPA community, either through the webinars or short courses or our publishing material, UXPA magazine and journal, so on, please send it to us through the email office@uxpa.org. Before end of the day, I would encourage you to log in to uxpa2026.org, visit the program and check it out. So now back to Sam for answering the question about the difference between lens and the framework. Somebody is having that question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. It's purely down to the fact that, and there are ACT frameworks out there that are really sort of serious and important, and are well established. And I guess it's maybe it's quite a British thing, but I didn't want to over egg ACT. I didn't want to make it feel like something super serious or also something that's hard work. And I wanted to keep it so that it felt like a practical tool that designers could use rather than something a bit sort of big and onerous. So I guess that's why I swing between framework is nicer to say, but lens makes it feel a bit more useful and usable, I think. But I'm more than happy if everyone wants to call it a framework and it becomes like super important and recognized. So, what's another one? Pushback from engineers. I think I'm going sort of backwards on this one, from bottom up. So that is, yeah, that is a fair challenge. It's but especially for complex agentic systems with lots of different models and rules and data sources. But it's not really, from a design perspective, it's not, you don't really need a mathematically perfect confidence score. It's just really a way that users can understand how certain or uncertain the system is. And that might sometimes be, yeah, just better expressed through language. So if it isn't, absolutely 100% clear, then it just to so it's not a precise confidence score. It's it's just about communicating in a way that people are able to see clearly how confident the system is. So not a perfect confidence. The goal isn't a perfect confidence measurement. It's just making uncertainty visible because a lot of the time it just is completely invisible.
That's excellent. Thank you, Sam. We have Alexandra who is asking, can you give some examples about UX research that is helping to shape the ethical agentic design?
It's funny, I gave this presentation, I did a practice run with one of my colleagues, and they said, how can we test this, to make sure it is as ethical, to test that we have created something ethical. So the research, UX research has a super important role here because these agentic systems are going to be changing the way people experience, the way they understand, and the way they trust technology. So I think a really good technique, observation technique, would be to see where users are losing track of what the system is doing. That would be definite for me, an important part of the research to back this up. We often see in research people overtrust the system, or they just don't understand how the decisions are being made, so they just accept the decisions. And I think what that insight can do is really shape those design patterns around transparency and make sure that we can test those intervention moments. That's a new thing to test, really, which is, are people able to see when they can step in and control that system, or see when the system is controlling on their behalf. So some kind of trust calibration studies. I think that calibrating trust is a really important thing to bring into the conversation, I think, here with when you're talking about user testing agentic systems, and perhaps transparency understanding or transparency comprehension testing. Yeah, I think we bring in some kind of new research methods around those areas, around calibrating trust, making sure users can intervene, and bringing in that level of transparency.
That's great. And I think you touched a little bit on the next question about are there one or two examples that come to mind where you see designers using the ACT lens or similar consideration in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything where the tool is making decisions on behalf of the user, which is what agentic does, from a really simple three agent chain, or really complex decisions as they will become more and more. It's a good time to bring it in. If you ask those questions, if you're not sure how agentic it is, or how automated or how much power you're handing over, by asking those questions, then that will tell you, because you might find out actually the system doesn't have much control at all, or it has a lot more than you think.
That's great. So I think we are at time so far. So thank you again, Sam, for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge with everyone. Like you said before, you're going to put the link in the chat for people who wanted to download that PDF file so they can access it at a later time. So we can do that as well. And then for everybody who maybe joined a little bit late or missed part of the presentation, we will have that recording available on our webinar library on the website. So feel free to go there. And then I see we have maybe one question that comes from Lisa. So Lisa, go ahead.
You see, you're on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, I think Lisa, you might want to unmute.
Or Lisa's waving goodbye with that hand.
Oh, maybe that can be as well. Yeah. Excellent. Great. So thanks again, everyone. And we will see you guys again for our webinars in April.